When the original tutorial was made, the feeder software was written in Python version 2.0. Since then, Python version 3 has been released, and it has been announced that Python 2 will no longer be supported as of January 1st, 2020. If your feeder is still running the original version of the software, that is not to say your feeder will just stop working on January 1st, but rather the software will just not be officially supported by Python and will stop receiving bug updates and patches. I have personally been running my feeder on Python 2 for several years now without having to upgrade. That being said, it is still best practice to go ahead with the software that will be supported moving forward, and that is Python version 3. Therefore, this tutorial is an addendum to the original video. It is meant to replace Section 1, Step 4, called Configure Feeder Software. That section in the original video starts at 14 minutes and 34 seconds and ends at 23 minutes and 1 second. Once you finish this video, you can continue on with the rest of the original tutorial, as the rest of the tutorial video is the same from there on out. The written instructions have also been modified to include the Python 3 instructions. If you originally set up the feeder with the Python 2 software, it is easy enough to fix by basically deleting your virtual environment and starting fresh using these video instructions. By deleting everything, you will obviously lose all your feeding history. So if that is important to you, make a copy of the database file and copy it back in once the new virtual environment is set up and created, and everything should work just fine. As always, anyone with any questions about upgrading their system from Python 2 to 3, please reach out to me. As well as anyone who just has any general questions, please let me know in the comments below. If you are setting up a new feeder after the posting date of this video, you will no longer need to worry about the original setup with Python 2 and just continue on with these instructions as normal. Like I mentioned before, once this video is complete, you can go back to the original tutorial at the 23-minute mark and continue on with the rest of the video, and everything else should be the same from here on out. As always, it's best to consult the written directions in the link below and use this video as more of a helpful visual tool. The written instructions will also always have the most up-to-date information, while it is difficult to update the videos on YouTube after they've been posted. So with that being said, let's continue on with the first step of setting up the Pi software using Python 3. Okay, in this step we will want to install some necessary software that is needed by the Pi for the web feeder to work. So the first thing we'll want to do is open up a terminal window, which is located with the black arrow box at the top. And the first piece of software that we want to download is some files needed for Apache and Python to work well together for the website itself. So we can do the sudo apt-get install command for that. And all these instructions are in the written directions, so you can just follow along and copy and paste them from there. So the next one we want to install is the Python 3 development tools. So we can go ahead and do a sudo apt-get install python 3 -dev. And the next one we would want to do is also for Python 3. It's virtual environment software that allows us to keep our software versions of Python separated with the actual Pi version itself. Then after that, we will want to install some dev tools for Apache, and this will allow us to set up the website correctly on the Pi itself. So we'll go ahead and run the install apache 2-dev. The next bit of software we need is to install Git, and Git will allow us to download the actual software for the website itself from my repo. And once that is done, you can download SQLite 3, which will be the database software that is used to keep track of all the feedings and videos on the website itself. The next bit of software is virtual env, which is just some more virtual environment software to allow the software for the system, feeder system on the Pi, to run in its own separate environment. And again, all these calls are in the written directions. You can just copy and paste them over. You'll see sometimes I type them in and sometimes I just paste them right in. So the next one I'm typing in is log rotate, which will rotate our logs from Apache. And if they're not rotated, they'll fill up all the space on our hard drive. So that is a necessary tool to have before actually going ahead and installing Apache itself, which, for those who don't know, is the web server software which will be hosting our website on the Pi. If you actually look closely, you'll notice a lot of these softwares, or I'll say they're already installed, they come pre-installed with Raspbian. Just going through them just to double check in case in the future they're not included for whatever reason. I'm including them in the instructions now. So once Apache is done, we need to run two more commands, the sudo a2 nmon headers, as well as the sudo systemctl restart Apache. And once that is done, we can go to the next step, which is actually setting up the folder for installing the website software itself. Okay, so in the next step, we'll be setting up the folder which the website and all the files for the website will be housed in. So the first thing we'll want to do is to just clear out our terminal and go ahead and create the folder itself. And the folder we're going to put it under is under var/www, so we can run the make directory command. And then we want to change our directory to be in that var/ww folder. Then once we're in that folder, we're going to go ahead and make a virtual environment using Python 3. And the environment name is going to be feeder. So after this command is run, there's going to be a folder under /var/www called feeder, which will have all our Python files for version 3. And the point of this is to kind of isolate our system from the rest of the Python files on the machine should something happen. And once that is done, we can just set up some more permissions just to make this folder a little bit more secure. So you can copy over those two commands from the written directions. And then we can change directory into that feeder itself and activate the virtual environment by typing in source space bin /activate. And you'll notice that we've activated the virtual environment called feeder because in front of the terminal line now it says feeder. So in our virtual environment now we need some more software to install. And the first one that we'll do is called Flask. So we'll use the Python installation software called pip and to install Flask, and Flask is the micro framework from which the website will run. So go ahead and write pip3 install Flask, and once that is done, we can install another piece of software called rpi.gpio, and this is just some Python software that will allow our software on the feeder system to interact with the GPIO pins on the Pi, and those Pi pins will be used to turn the feeder and change the button and populate the feeder screen should you have one, and we'll get into those in future directions. And then finally, there's just one last bit of software needed to allow the Python website to talk nicely with Apache. So go ahead and run the mod_wsji, and once that is done, that's all the software we need. We just need to go ahead and clone the actual website software itself. So you can go ahead and copy the command from the written directions, but we'll basically be cloning the website software from my repo, and you'll see it'll be cloning down. So now there'll be a directory under feeder also called feeder, so we'll want to change directory down into var/www/feeder/feeder, and that's where the website software itself will be held. And within that bit of software, there is a file called createfiles.py, which will initialize the config for the website, as well as set up some of the files for the database for the website itself. So you can go ahead and type in Python createfiles.py, and you'll see it'll spit out some information saying that it's creating the DB and also initializing some of the application configurations. And we'll get into some of those more in the future, but for now let's just move on and just set up just a few more permissions on the folder itself just to make the website a little bit more secure. And once that's done, we just can move on to the next section, which is just a little bit more tweaking to allow the Python website to talk nicely with Apache. So we'll go into that next section now. Okay, so these next few steps are needed to get Python 3 to work nicely with the web server Apache. So the first thing we'll want to do is copy this sudo install module command from the written directions. And when we run that in our terminal, it'll spit out two lines. One starts with load module WSJI and the other one WSJI Python home. You want to go ahead and open up a notepad and copy both of these lines and paste them into the notepad itself. So go ahead and copy and paste those in. And then basically we want to take each one of these lines and put them into two new config files that are needed within Apache themselves. So the first one we'll want to do is paste in the command to open up WSJI _ express.load, and we can copy the command from the written directions, and then we'll want to copy the first line, the load module line, and paste it into this file. And once that is done, we can hit Control X to exit and then Y to save and enter. And then we'll have to go ahead and paste the second line into the second file. But before we go ahead and do that, we need to know which version of Python we're actually running, just to make this video a little bit more future-proof as Python improves in numbers. So you want to go up to your folder explorer and go to var/www/feeder/lib, and you'll notice here that there's a folder called Python, and mine is Python 3.7. So just make note of that number, the 3.7, as we move into this next step. So the next step will be to open up the next config file, and we can copy it from the written directions, the WSJI _ express.config, and we'll want to copy the second line into this file, the WSJI Python home. And then we'll also want to create another line in this file, which is pointing to that folder we just opened. So you'll see mine goes to var www/feeder/lib Python 3.7. If you have a newer version of Python in the future, just make sure that your line corresponds to that actual folder value. And then exit that config and save it as normal. And then go ahead and we'll have to just restart some of the Apache systems, A2EN mod as well as Apache 2. And once that is done, we can continue on to the next step, which is actually setting up Apache and the website itself on the system. That concludes the updated section for specific instructions on setting up the feeder software using Python 3. Like I mentioned previously, you can go back to the original video at the 23-minute mark and continue the rest of the tutorial, and everything else should be the same from here on out. If you are previously upgrading your feeder from Python 2 to Python 3, your feeder should now be working correctly, and you do not have to go back to the original video and continue on with the instructions of resetting Apache and permissions, etc. You can just simply restart your Apache service and check to make sure everything is in working order. For those watching this video for the first time, after the posting date, you may continue on with the original video as is at minute 23. And as always, if there are any questions, please reach out to me and I will do my best to answer in the comments. Thanks again, and see you all back in the original tutorial.